For the cops, the streets are their domain. Harass the homeless is their game. Throw in the trash all they've attained. And light a match, set it aflame. Resist arrest if they complain. A handcuff taken, entertain. The treatment is inhumane. But it's just another day on patrol. Cops so.
I am here, we are here with the Defund CPD campaign. Make some noise, everybody that's with us this morning. So just for a little context, a little over a year ago, our city, our state, our nation was immersed in what can only be described as a global uprising. And from that space, the community that has been organizing for the greater part of a decade in resistance to policing and carceral violence in our city and in our society came together and launched a political campaign that is built of grassroots organizations centered around outreach, mutual aid, and political education within our communities. And from that space, we have been working, we have been organizing, and we are coming back this year to shape how the political discourse is being proliferated in our city about how investments should go, about how violence and harm occurs, particularly amongst our most vulnerable people in the south and west sides of Chicago that have experienced a level of abandonment, of divestment, that could only be described as violence. And so we are here this morning with many of our collaborators, of our endorsing organizations, to relaunch our demands and to shape how we need to be discussing, particularly as this city is about to go into its budget process. So we need to know that our executive branch or our mayor has a lot of control in terms of how public resources are allocated, and we want to make sure that there is a wider discourse than what is being shaped by City Hall in terms of how investment should work, but particularly when we're talking about policing, because we are a part of a grassroots effort that is demanding that we divest and defund from policing. And so, thank you. And so before we get to our speakers, I'm going to read off a few of our specific demands for this year that is concentrating on the focus of going through the budget cycle, but I just want to offer one framing to all who are watching and to all of the media outlets that are reporting and covering this, is that not only are we talking about the oppressive, torturous, murderous institution that is the Chicago Police Department, and discussing why we need to be taking power and resources away to address that harm that is historical and contemporary, but we are also talking about the well-being and the protection of our people. And so often, when we get to talking about discussions of divesting from policing or defunding or abolition, it is countered or framed as if we are not talking about the violence that we are experiencing in our community. And so over the last few weeks, few months, the framing in a lot of our institutional outlets have been claiming that the issue of violence in our community is connected to the fact that the police don't have the trust of the community, which is true and accurate, and I believe speaks to the political intelligence of our communities. And what we need to understand is that we need to decouple our understanding of harm and violence from investment in policing. And so what we often name is that if we have better policies, or if we just clean up around the edges and make people more confident in a violent, torturous organization, that is what will actually stop the violence that is occurring in our community. And we believe that that is a dehumanizing, anti-Black, anti-Indigenous framing. To say that having more resources in a police department will address the communities that have been redlined historically, that are experiencing food apartheid, that are in a place where we are right now, that have experienced a divestment in education in ways that have not been seen anywhere else in our nation. It is inappropriate to say more resources or better training or a facility for officers who have power and privilege in our society to be the way to name how we are addressing violence that is happening in our community. So simply put, what we are saying is well-resourced communities are safe communities. So if we want safety in our communities, the answer is very simple. Invest the resources directly into those communities, because the thing that we know from the failures of policing is that the violence we experience is geographic and communal. There are maps that are drawn that say where the violence is concentrated. And those same maps also say where public investment is, where the history of redlining is, where the distribution of vaccines took place. The same maps are showing how investment in our city is working. And so we know where the need is, and it is our state and our city's responsibility to address that need. We know that all over the world, including in our city, particularly young people, 16 to 24-year-olds, are in crisis, need access to education, employment, and mental health services, and the answer is not more military response, which is what the police are. So with that introduction, I just want to read off the specific demands that we have for this year, and then I want to introduce some of our speakers, but just want to say again that every dollar invested into the police department is actually a vote of no confidence into our community. We believe that we are confident, actually, that our communities have the capacity, the knowledge, the indigenous structures to be able to protect ourselves and to heal the violence that is occurring, and that requires investment. And so with that, I want to read off our top line demand with our 4 specific demands that we want to make sure is shaping how this 2021 budget cycle is being discussed of all of our public representatives as well as our institutional organizations in our city. So first and foremost, this just stands no matter what the year is, but the numbers are specific. We demand a divestment from the Chicago Police Department and that the $1.8 billion of public resources be directly reinvested into Chicago's under-resourced communities in order to build and expand life-affirming institutions. Yes. So we need to note that 30% of our budget goes to an ineffective, torturous, murderous organization. And we need to also note that that increased proportionally over the last year. So 2 out of every 5 public dollars is going to an institution that does not work and is harming our people. We want that to be redistributed. All right, now for our 2021 demands. 1, fund community resources, infrastructure, and violence interruption jobs by laying off cops. There is no data that supports that more presence of police actually decreases violence and harm in our community.
That's right.
Actually, it should be noted, because it is never reported, that of all major cities, Chicago has more police per capita than any other major city in the United States of America. So actually Chicago, and we know that those resources are not distributed equally, they are concentrated on the south and west sides of Chicago. So it could be claimed that the south and west side of Chicago are actually the most police areas in this country. And so it proves, if nothing else, that actually the hyper investment in policing actually increases violence. Wherever you invest in militarism, you will see violence. We want a redistribution. 2, very specifically, we don't use COVID relief dollars for the Chicago Police Department or banks. I will repeat that. Don't use COVID relief dollars for the Chicago Police Department or banks. Last year, our city, while experiencing desperate need, received $400 million in federal COVID relief dollars, and our mayor, who was taking emergency power and had complete executive authority over those resources, invested $280 million of $400 million in relief to the Chicago Police Department. So while thousands of people were being denied housing assistance, while businesses are being closed down, and they want to use uprising as a way to act as if they are in support of local business, when they actually had the power and resources to support our communities, they gave it to an over-resourced police department. Don't use COVID dollars for the police or banks, because we need to note we are standing in front of a closed school right now, and the banking and financial system in this city and this nation destroyed our public education system, destroyed our public health system, and destroyed our housing system. And so to give federal relief dollars for a pandemic and a national emergency to banks and to police, which we also need to uplift the connection between the two, is violence. Number 3, cancel the Chicago Police Department contract with ShotSpotter and redirect the money to the Peace Book and Community Restoration Ordinance to effectively address gun violence. We want to cancel the ShotSpotter contract, and we want to redistribute those resources into the Peace Book Ordinance, because we know through the network of organizations that have been doing years and years of outreach that's only intensified over this last year, that community and engagement and intervention is how we address violence. And that is quantifiably way more effective than the responsive and late responsive police department that only shows up after the fact and does not care about our people. So we want to invest into jobs. We want to invest into our people. We want our aunts and our uncles and our cousins who are unemployed and underemployed to be resourced and supported in taking care of their community.
Yes.
And it also needs to be noted in this demand that we are naming that this is about gun violence, that actually the investment into policing has proven in the long run to not be effective, and we need to look into other solutions. And then number 4, end all closed-door negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police.
Woo!
I will repeat that. Number 4, end all closed-door negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police. So our city is important because as far as we know, the first police officer to ever be convicted of murder on duty for killing a black person was Jason Van Dyke for the gruesome killing of Laquan McDonald. And we know that that conviction, which is not justice served completely, but we know that that conviction, which was historically important, only came because there was documented evidence that was FOIA'd and released to the community.
Yes.
So our entire society saw this killing, and it is arguably one of the most graphic acts of state violence that has ever been documented. And just to prove what the Fraternal Order of Police is, they defend that act. They say that that is what policing is. So anytime that there are acts of torture, anytime that a police officer kills somebody, the Fraternal Order of Police says that is what their job is. And so that, more than anything, proves that this is a violent organization.
Yes.
They also, from their leadership on down, have shown outward support with the insurrectionist factions of our society.
Yes.
They participated
Yes.
in the insurrection of January 6th. And recently, it should be important to note, they also organized a vote of no confidence for our mayor and our superintendent. And interestingly enough, we share that sentiment of we also don't have confidence in our mayor and our superintendent, but for very different reasons. But one of the things that the Fraternal Order of Police said is during what would be called high crime or very dangerous weekends around holidays, they are deployed in extreme numbers. And they say, regardless of how we are deployed or how much overtime we do, it does not matter. We cannot stop what is happening. So on one end, they are demanding increased investment, increased overtime, increased power, and increased protection under the guise that if they have proper placement in community, they can prevent violence. But when they are deployed and when those resources are used, they say, because the evidence proves, they have nothing to offer in terms of stopping and shaping how violence occurs in our community. And so not only do we believe that this is a violent, illegitimate organization that should not be considered traditional labor, but we also oppose and resist the fact that they have unique bargaining power and negotiating power with our city. So no other body gets to negotiate in the way that the Fraternal Order of Police does, and that speaks to how we are naming the way police are positioned in our society. So the mayor right now has been in a multi-year closed-door negotiation process, which has only actually protected police. And within that contract, we can't go into the details now, there are horrible protections, such as not being able to be tested for alcohol or being able to retract a statement after making it, after committing acts of violence. And so the police contract is one that should be scrutinized, one that should be transparent, and one that should be negotiated with democracy. And right now that is not happening. So those are our 4 demands. I will restate them at the end of this press conference, but now I will begin to introduce some of our speakers that will continue to speak not only on these specific demands, but the larger effort to redistribute and divest from the resources that are being invested into a militaristic municipal force, and we want those reinvested into our community. And so with no further ado, I'm going to bring our first speaker to the microphone, an organizer who is part of the steering committee with the Defund CBD campaign, also part of BYP 100, U Medics, and a few other organizational spaces. Please welcome to the microphone, Tainetta Muhammad.
So before we begin, I just want to ground us in the area that we are in. This area is the first land the first home of indigenous peoples. We are in between a space of Fuller Park, Washington Park, and Inglewood, where there are black and brown people who have lived here for years, who have been divested from and pushed out of this area consistently. As a member of BYP 100, U Medics, and the Defund Steering Committee, I have learned that it is through community care, it is through compassion, and it is through valuing of life that we get to the source of deepness of a person and the world that needs to be changed and how the world can be changed. We know that the things that you invest in grow. And we are here standing in front of a school that has been abandoned for years, across the street from a police station that is bustling, that is fruitful and has much of the city's dollars, and a few blocks from 51st and Wentworth, where a houseless community once lived, and that has been destroyed by the city, by police. We need to invest in schools. We need to invest in mental health clinics. We need to invest in hospitals and houseless folks and people who have been divested from these in marginalized communities that have been divested from. Organizations like U Medics and BYP 100 directly invest in community by providing mutual aid via Organizations like BYP 100 and U Medics directly invest in community by providing mutual aid in the form of food and in the form of household items, while Lori Lightfoot spends COVID money and relief dollars on policing. That ain't right. That ain't right. The national rent moratorium has ended, and there are people who are going to be needing intensive help and resources and spaces for them to assert their liberation. However, the city has decided to take away from these folks and invest in white supremacist structures. Through organizations like U Medics, we teach crisis response and how to de-escalate situations within community with community. We support with life-saving techniques, teaching CPR and how to address gunshot wounds and gunshot violence. This work gets to the root, and these spaces and more are direct examples of how investing in supportive community-led projects brings our wellness and culture into the community. Defund CPD is demanding that the city invest in infrastructure and the well-being of Black and brown residents in the city of Chicago by divesting from policing and surveillance with technology like ShotSpotter. Residents should not have to fight to save mercy.
That's right. That's right.
Residents should not have to fight to save Mercy Hospital. We should have grocery stores. We should have streets that don't have potholes and have bike lanes. We should have, our policing budget continues to grow and police continue to show up after the fact, if at all. Investments in technology like ShotSpotter bring police into communities where everyone is treated like a suspect and creates more than 61 ShotSpotter initiated police deployments. And they turn up no evidence of crime, let alone gun crime. The work of creating wellness must be intentional, and I believe through Defund CPD, the Defund CPD campaign, it can and will happen. Thank you.
And I appreciate Tainetta again for naming where we are. And we are in this space intentionally. So it needs to be known that we are in front of a beautiful and enormous school building that was closed down. We are right off 51st Street, right off the Dan Ryan. On the other side of the Dan Ryan, we have this school that is closed, but on the other side we have a police station where organizers and activists were beat last year and taken and stored and kidnapped in that space. So we are physically able to see the violence in this place that we are standing. Right next to that police station, for years now, folks have recently been displaced and are starting to come back to that space. Houseless people have been occupying under that bridge. There is a police station that is open 24/7, and this publicly owned space that could be a warming center, that could be turned into shelter, that could be a training for conflict resolution, that could be operating mutual aid. But this is closed, unoccupied, and a drain on public resources. And on the other side of this highway, we can see the investment that our city prioritizes. And so I want to continue bringing our speakers to speak to this violence and speak to the solutions and the new world that we are trying to create, because that's what this campaign is about. Anybody who's seeing this, we want to invite you into this work, and it requires imagination and community to build this new world. So I want to bring a young person to the microphone now to talk from a youth perspective about how this investment, particularly these emergency resources, should be better prioritized. So I want to invite to the microphone Avery Sims from the Alliance 98.
I want to take us back to October 20th of 2014 to March 29th of 2021. October 20th is the day that LaQuan McDonald was slain. March 29th was the day Adam Toledo was slain. These both were youth. LaQuan McDonald was 17 years old. I am only 18 years old. He didn't even make it to my age. Adam Toledo was 13 years old. He didn't even make it to high school. And now I want to take us to a place like this. And when we talk about youth slayings, we have to talk about the divestment from youth as well. After School Matters money has dwindled over these past few years. Guess what we've seen with the police? $280 million invested directly to them. $280 million invested directly to them from this CARES Act money. We've seen all this money directly invested from Lori Lightfoot directly to police and not to my youth. I just graduated high school and I have no means of paying for college. That ain't right. That ain't right. Youth need investment that is not directly tied to police. The Boys and Girls Club has a direct contract with police, and we do not need. We need direct investment. We need schools to reopen. We need mental health services. We need after-school programs that do not have ties to police.
That's right.
And you might ask me, they have exist for all coexist for all. Why can't they coexist? I can simply tell you they've coexist for all these years and it has failed. Black and brown youth are slain in these streets every single day. But police are engaged and told to do this every single day. Adam Toledo was justice. LaQuan McDonald was justice. This is not justice to us. This is not justice for us. Justice for us is investment. Justice for us is money for us. Black and brown people deserve what we need. The Mayor Lori Lightfoot and a lot of these older people ain't giving it to us. We need programs to set us up for the future, not programs to set us up to have these school to prison pipelines, these, you know what I'm saying, police officers in our schools. We don't need 33 million. We don't need 15 million. We don't need none of those millions going straight to police. I don't need none of their budgets, none of my school budgets going directly to police. I need better uniforms for my schools. I need better after school programs. I don't need kids paying to play basketball and football for the school programs, while meanwhile they salaries, police salaries getting paid for directly by schools. That ain't right. Police do not need to be in our schools. Police do not need to be next to our youth. Police do not need to be in our hoods. A safe neighborhood is a neighborhood without police.
Yes.
I'll say that one more time for people in the back. A safe neighborhood is a neighborhood without police.
Yes.
Look no further than Oak Park, Elmwood Park. These people are not police. But guess what? Guess what the common denominator between us and them? We're not white.
Say that.
Black and brown people are over police in this nation. Black and brown people are over police in Chicago specifically. We need to get police off our streets, because our streets are our own. We know how to dictate our own streets, not the police. Once again, I am 18 years old. These people behind me are just around my age. If not, they grew up in the same neighborhoods we did. These police did not. We know our neighborhoods best. Youth knows our neighborhoods best. We gotta listen to our youth. And I'm not even just saying that because I am youth. I think youth know better than these old folks. We know what's better. We got ears to the streets. We know how much money we need from our jobs. We know what we need in our schools. Guess what? It ain't police. So that's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Make some noise one more time for Avery, for his truth and honesty. And so we believe that the solution is right here. This is just a microcosm of the network of people that are standing up to demand how our city should be shaped. And we are also here as truth tellers. We believe that our political establishment has not been telling the truth. We believe that our mayor does not tell the truth. For her to position herself as a police reformer or as an agent of reform is gaslighting and inappropriate. To not acknowledge that Mayor Lori Lightfoot inherited a police department that from 2010 to 2015 killed more people than any other police department in America. So to be talking about reform or to be talking about police and community relationships without being honest about the fact that this is the capital of torture and that this is the capital of murder is gaslighting and abusive. And we are here with the communities that are working to heal and to create new space. And so I want to bring someone up from a very, very mighty organization. Everybody make some noise for the Brighton Park Neighborhood Council as we welcome to the microphone Veronica Ortiz.
Hi, good morning. Veronica Ortiz, O-R-T-I-Z, Clinical Director with Brighton Park Neighborhood Council. Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be with this very vibrant group of individuals who are very passionate about what we see day in and day out. Let's just look at the events over this last year. It would be neglectful if we did not really look at the catastrophic effects that the divestment our communities have experienced, particularly our brown and black communities have experienced day in and day out. We are in a system that is built, let me repeat that again, it is built, okay, to undermine any and all opportunities to thrive. From inequity in our school system, unfair housing practices, little or no access to mental health services, police brutality, little economic opportunity, lack of social services, systemic racism, and prevalent violence are all part of the collective trauma our community endures day in and day out. This pandemic has simply exacerbated the trauma symptoms our community was already experiencing. Throughout my career, year in and year out, I experienced children and families who come to me and come to our services and to my team asking for just help to get through the day, just to learn new capacities to manage their daily struggles. And through our assessments, year after year, I've realized it's not just what they're presenting with, it's not just their individual experiences, they are carrying generations of trauma and wounds that they did not impact themselves. They're carrying the weight of the generations before us, the systemic oppression that has kept us down from succeeding, from thriving. Every day in the schools, we see more and more young people exhibiting chronic emotional, physical, and psychological traumatic effects.
Yes.
It's a generational issue that needs to be treated now. These trauma symptoms affect our youth's ability to succeed, to thrive, to develop. Everything that they need is affected by traumatic exposure. What we are doing for decades is not working. It's not working. Pumping more money into our police, it's not working. Taking money away from the crucial services that help our youth, that help our families, that build our communities, it's not working. We need to heal. We need to heal from the effects of COVID, the devastating effects of COVID, the generational trauma, the oppression that haunts us and keeps us from flourishing and fulfilling our potential. We need more youth programs. We need more housing. We need equal access to healthcare. We need the opportunity to live and thrive in a community that is not hypervigilance, that is not hyper-surveyed, right? Over-policing is not working. On the contrary, it's only making matters worse. As a mental health provider in a nonprofit agency, I request funding from the city, from the county, from the state, from the federal government, and I am held to standards. I write in outcomes that I am expected to meet in order to keep my funding.
Held accountable.
And I have data that shows that what we are doing is working. If I held the Chicago Police Department to those standards, they would fail.
Miserably.
So why does the money keep going to a system that has not proven to be effective? What I'm saying is that the money should go to our communities. It should be pumped into our communities because we see that that works. We need to heal. We need to heal from the trauma before us, and we need to heal from the trauma that we are experiencing day in and day out. What we need, folks, is treatment, not more trauma. Thank you. I would like to share that in Spanish as best as I can. Okay? Si miramos los eventos del último año, no podemos ignorar los efectos catastróficos de un sistema que está construido para socavar cada una de las oportunidades de prosperar para la comunidad latina y afroamericana. La inequidad en nuestro sistema escolar, los recursos de vivencia injustos, falta de acceso a servicios de salud mental, la brutalidad policial, las oportunidades económicas limitadas, la falta de servicios sociales, el racismo sistémico y la violencia comunitaria, todos son parte del trauma colectivo que nuestra comunidad soporta todos los días. Esta pandemia ha empeorado los síntomas del trauma de nuestra comunidad que ya estaba experimentando. A lo largo de mi carrera he trabajado con niños y familias que vienen a buscar apoyo y lo que encuentro es que ya vienen con el trauma generacional que ellos tienen que cargar en sus hombros. Todos los días las escuelas vemos más y más jóvenes que exhiben síntomas crónicos, emocionales, psicológicos y físicos asociados con el ciclo de trauma. Este ciclo afecta el desarrollo y el éxito de nuestros jóvenes. El tema es generacional y debe de ser tratado ahora. Lo que estamos haciendo no está funcionando. Inyectar más dinero a la policía no está funcionando. Retirar dinero de servicios cruciales como salud mental, programas para jóvenes y escuelas no está funcionando. Es ahora de un enfoque que ponga a la comunidad en el centro. Lo que necesitamos es sanar. Necesitamos sanarnos del trauma de COVID, de los efectos del trauma generacional, la opresión que persigue y nos impide prosperar y desarrollar nuestro potencial. Necesitamos más programas para jóvenes, necesitamos un sistema escolar dinámico, necesitamos una vivienda justa y equitativa, necesitamos un acceso equitativo a la atención médica, necesitamos que todos vivan libres de discriminación, racismo y marginación. Lo merecemos. Es ahora el momento de redistribuir los fondos a nuestra comunidad. Lo que necesitamos es tratamiento, no más trauma. Gracias. Thank you.
So we have been organizing. We've been organizing for over a year now, well, for many years now, but this campaign specifically has been organized in the city for over the past year. And we've organized and moved thousands of people. And many of those people made demands upon their representatives, made demands upon City Hall. And one of the responses to keep people at bay or to push folks is your demand to divest from policing and to defund the Chicago Police Department cannot happen because of the FOP contract. And then you ask about that contract and you realize that that contract has been expired for many years now, and the mayor and the mayor's office, as a solo effort, has been in closed door negotiations. So they say that the public demand can't happen because of the contract, and we have no say on what that contract says. The fact that it promises exorbitant amounts of overtime to police officers that other workers don't get, that it offers education resources to officers that other folks in the community don't have, and it also protects them from being accountable for most of the violence that they commit. And so we want to talk more about how democracy should happen in our city, and if the police are going to have this control and this power over our political processes, that should be happening with transparency. So we are inviting to the microphone a member of City Council, Alderman Byron Cicho Lopez.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Byron Cicho Lopez, Alderman of the 25th Ward, and I want to first thank the coalition, the Phone Coalition. I want to thank all the community groups for your courage to stand up for what's just and fair for our communities. We know that this is not an easy stand. because of the level of retaliation and harassment that goes to those activists and organizers that are demanding justice for all. I want to be very clear that we unequivocally reject this contract with the FOP.
Yes.
We unequivocally reject and declare as immoral the $365 million for 4 years of back pay that this contract includes. It is immoral and unacceptable that despite what we have seen in our city over the last year at least, with the level of devastation, the level of suffering, over 750 people have been killed in the city of Chicago, in our communities. Our brothers and sisters are siblings that are suffering. What we need is relief. What we need is investment, as we have heard from the young people, the youth, the future. We time after time talk about listening to our young people, listening to our youth, but in practice we dismiss it. We don't include our communities in these important conversations. Last year, almost 40% of the budget went for the Chicago Police Department, and a record number of $280 million went for overtime. What are the results? Let me be clear that when we know what keeps our community safe, what keeps our community safe is investments. We are here behind a closed school. Of the 50 schools that the city closed, in 88% of these closures in black communities. Half of the mental health clinics were shut down. But yet, we continue to invest in failed policies that are not only not working, but are criminalizing our young people and our youth. And we have to be clear about that. That doesn't keep any of us safe. And that goes for every corner of the city of Chicago. Because we are not living in silos. We don't live in bubbles. We live in communities. The level of violence, of displacement, of evictions, of foreclosures, extracting the generational wealth of people who are trying to make it, just to make it, working day in and day out. We have seen the record unemployment numbers that are affecting our communities. The unemployment numbers, the poverty, the inequality. And what we receive from the city of Chicago is more repression, more police brutality. It is very clear that what we need is to make investments in relief and employment. I tell you, as an elected official, how sad it is that today, in the 25th ward, we apply for 200 youth jobs, 200 jobs. A list that was complied working with social workers, community members, community groups, to keep our youth people safe, our youth, our future safe. And because of a snafu, according to the One Summer Chicago program, we cannot provide 200 jobs for the summer for all youth. But when it comes to police budgets, when it comes to investing and overtime, the money offers always appears. We're failing our youth. We're failing our young people. We're failing our city. We're failing all of us. And what's worse is that we see the solutions right in front of us. It is important that the public understands why it's important to make sure that these negotiations are open in the public, that these conversations are including the community groups, including the city council members, who should be vetting these contracts, and they shouldn't be demanding more for our constituents, for the people that we represent. We don't represent the special interest groups. We don't represent the corporate interest groups that continue to govern with an iron fist. We represent the people of Chicago.
That's right.
And that's what we hear. Let me just include another important fact of the contract. The fact of the matter is that this contract also includes key provisions that are not being discussed. For instance, the use of body cameras that we see the level of unaccountability that continues to brutalize our young people. But we are still allowing the Chicago Police Department to operate without any accountability for our communities. We hear time after time Mayor Lightfoot and the Chicago Police Department talking about better relationships with our communities. But their actions show that they're not capable of that. And the fact that they're negotiating these contracts shamefully behind closed doors is a proof of that. It is concerning what we see in the city of Chicago, when we see even the police department. We have documented cases of connections with the Proud Boys, with white supremacists. This is not going to keep our community safe. What will keep us safe is investment, is transparency, is actually discussing with the communities what works. This hasn't worked. If it's based on the funding of police, the Chicago Police Department, we should be the safest city in the country. But what we see is immoral, is sad, is unacceptable, and I thank you for standing up for justice. We're here with you because we do listen to you. Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Lopez. We understand, particularly if you look at the Fraternal Order of Police, that this is not an agency of people that work for community. This is an agency of people that work for themselves. And it is important, as I work with the Chicago Torture Justice Center, that we stand in opposition to that violent organization. We need to understand that Chicago is the only place in the country that has a domestic center for survivors of torture from state violence, and that is because the Chicago Police Department has for decades been at the forefront of organizing torture as a way to substantiate its work. We understand that Illinois has been leading the country in exonerations for forcing people into false confessions, largely because of the work of the Chicago Police Department. And many of the survivors who the FOP is currently organizing against to re-incarcerate, or those who are incarcerated to remain incarcerated, many of the survivors experience their torture in that police station right across the street. We also stand in solidarity with families that have lost loved ones. I think right now with Dorothy Holmes, who lost her son Ronnie Man, also known as Ronald Johnson, and that officer was housed in that police department that is right across the street from this closed school. We know the history of, it's not just black and white, we know the history of black officers such as Ronald Watts, who for over a decade was causing terror and havoc in public housing and extorting drug dealers to sell other drugs to other folks, and increasing and participating in what is called gang violence. The police are the biggest gang in this city. So we stand in solidarity with workers, we stand in solidarity with folks who are working with our community, we stand in solidarity with mental health professionals, with youth organizers, with artists, with library workers, with Chicago Park District workers, with healthcare workers, and we stand in solidarity with teachers. I said we stand in solidarity with teachers. And we know that our educators and the folks that maintain our schools are the actual greatest investment into the economy, into health, into addressing violence, into building community. So with us, we have been standing next to the mighty, mighty CTU. Say CTU. CTU. And I want to welcome to the microphone Ms. Tara Stamps.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. My name is Tara, T-A-R-A, Stamps, S-T-A-M-P-S. And I stand here right now, and before I begin to speak, I just want to say that I stand on the shoulders of my mother, the great legendary Marion Stamps, who was an activist in this city from the time she left Mississippi after the murder of one of our great leaders in Jackson, Mississippi, and came to Chicago with a belly full of a baby and one on her hip at 16, and fought for the soul of black folks and oppressed people in this city until she died at the early age of 51. I believe the children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way is more than just a catchy lyric in a catchy song. It is the truth. But there can be no more harm done against our future than when you close 50 schools. There can be no more violence perpetrated against the young black and brown bodies that occupy these buildings than when you spend more on policing than you do on educating them. So right now I'm calling for not only defunding the Chicago police, who has just always have been a violent entity in our community. Everybody knows if my grandson was standing here right now at 10 years old, he is already seeing the police as his natural enemy. And that's not because of his own imaginings. That's because our children have watched the videos of their brothers and sisters slain in the street by people who were sworn to serve and protect us, who do anything but serve and protect us. $33 million are spent each year on cops in schools. We want them out. That $33 million can be used to hire librarians, for which on the west side of Chicago, there are none. There's only one librarian in the community of Austin. There's only 20 librarians on the south side, in Roseland. We have, in closing schools, not only criminalized our children, we have pushed out black teachers. And we don't really want to talk about what that meant for black life in the city of Chicago when the person who taught you your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s is now seen as the enemy. When did it become okay for teachers to be seen as against the people? How is that even possible? That $33 million can be used for librarians, for school nurses, for social workers, for restorative practices, things that actually help to make our buildings safer. But no, what did Lori Lightford do? She fired 423 people in June. She fired 423 Chicago public school employees in June. And understaffed buildings are dangerous. Understaffed buildings are dangerous. We want to talk about trauma, and we throw that word around like we throw around transparency, right? To the point where it becomes a cliche. And we don't stop to think about the baby that has lost a grandmother, an aunt, a brother, who has been sitting in front of a computer for the last year and a half, who has little access to health care, little access to healthy foods. We're living in food and nutritional deserts. We have libraries that are closed. We have nurses that are not in the building. We have vaccine sites that have not been set up. Our people are not being vaccinated. And yet you want to pour billions of dollars into a police system that does not work. I have been a teacher for 25 years. If I only pass 40% of my kids year after year, I'd be out of a job. I'd be out of a job. But it is amazing to me, and I'm saying that because I can't find a better word, that you can continue to fail your job and not only not get fired, but get increases, get bonuses, right? Get encouraged to continue to do a bad job. When we close schools that could have been reopened as centers for homeless teens, homeless young people, where we could have used green energy and employed our people and gave them a pathway to the future. We continue to sit on land where the closed schools add to the blight and the disinvestment. The physical manifestation of I don't give a fill in the blank about you. It's blatant. But you want to play these little ditties and these songs and you want to pacify our youth, and then you get pissed when they take to the street because of this unrest, because they know what they feel in their spirit is an assault on their soul, or it's an assault on their very humanity. It's everything that says, I am not human, I am less than, I am other than, and then you want to get pissed when we demand more. I don't say get pissed, I say go harder, young people, because either one or two things gonna work. Either we gonna roll with them, or they gonna roll over us. And that's what's going to happen, because I believe the children of the future is more than just a song. It is a fact. And our young people have a right to live in a city that they deserve. They have a right to live in communities that are well-resourced and well-funded, where there are pathways to excellence and mobility and for a future. We've had it, we've done it, but we've been stripped away of it. And we've made this city continually the tales of two cities, the tales of the haves and have-nots. And what I'm saying to you all is, we have listened to decades of mayors, all of them pitiful. But Lori is the worst of the bad because she promised to do better. And so in lying to me, you took my choice away. And so you lied, Lori, when you pushed a progressive platform that's anything but a progressive platform. And nobody asked for you to be anything special, Lori. We just asked you to be who you said you were. Be who you say you are. If you are for young people, then employ young people. If you are for ending the police brutality in this city, then defund the police. Come out of these private practices. If you are for education, and you know that education is single-handedly the best choice and the best way for a pathway forward for our young people, then fund our schools. Pay for teachers. Make sure there's a social worker in every building. Do you know right now, with all the money that's been given, we still do not have a social worker for every building? When we know that our babies are going to experience and come back more traumatized than they were when they left in March? Do you know we still don't have enough nurses when 12 and under are not even eligible to be vaccinated? You have not made sure that you got a nurse in every building. When you got the money to have a nurse in every building, this is what we need. We need to be rescued from the hells and the ravages of COVID-19 and the ravages of ill intent and disregard and neglect and apathy. We need to be recovered financially. Put the money and the resources that we know work in community organizing, in our young people, in mental health facilities. Open the mental health facilities. Just a fraction of what you're giving the police can open up all the mental health facilities you close and then some. Just a fraction of that. And finally, we need to be restored to wholeness, to wellness, as best as we possibly can. And that means funding our communities, investing in our communities, making sure that our schools are open and open as safe places, not just with hand sanitizers and masks, but with people and compassion and grace and care. And folk that's from and of this community and from and of this city that look at these black and brown babies for the gems and the gold and the treasures that they are. Not commodities that they can talk about learning loss on so they can pay $300 million to testing. There ain't nothing to test. Do real authentic assessments with our young people so that you can get a real understanding of where their head and heart is. So I'm gonna say this to you, Lori, with this power. In this space and in this time and in this season that we're in, it's not enough to be black. It's not enough to be female. You gotta be right. And you gotta stand on the right side of children. That's where I live. It's my address. Get there.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stamps. Excuse me, Tara, Ms. Stamps, thank you so much for your honesty. It is so clear, this pandemic has made things so clear. We're seeing that our students are about to re-enter buildings. And I invite folks to go back to the beginning of the pandemic when we first were learning what this virus was. And before the schools were closed, the announcement that our city council and CPS put out, their way to address the virus as it was coming into our city was to say, we're gonna go and make sure that all the bathrooms in CPS schools have soap. Which means that wasn't insured before the pandemic came.
Hello, say that.
So that is an example, as this building is, of abandonment, of neglect, and that is violence. And policing is violence. And what we say is, an investment in violence is an investment in violence. And that's what we are getting. And so I want to restate our focus demands for 2021 and then make space for any questions for me or for the rest of our speakers. So just briefly. We want a redistribution of the $1.8 billion into community infrastructure. And to focus for this 2021 budget cycle, 1, we want to fund community resources and infrastructure by laying off cops and investing into violence interruption. 2, don't use COVID relief dollars for the Chicago Police Department or banks. 3, cancel the Chicago Police Department contract with ShotSpotter and redirect the money to the Peace Book and Community Restoration Ordinance to effectively address gun violence. And 4, end all closed-door negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police. And these are our demands from the Defund CPD campaign. Thank you for being here, and we'll take any questions if you have.
And when you're black, a traffic stop's how they attack. In the trunk, they'll put a bag of crack, plant a gun on the scene. As a matter of fact, start a confrontation is payback. Trigger happy, they react. You run away, shoot you right in the back. Never punished for the way they act. Police force wholly unchecked, cause property is all they protect. A death sentence if you disrespect. Use a chokehold to kill direct. A taser with the same effect. I'll snuff you out with a knee to the neck. Ruthless killers not in control. Cops so